Hey folks, this video and screen capture is designed to try to orient you a little bit to the world of the golden age of Greece. Now we're looking at several videos about Greek theater and Roman theater in the period. I wanted to give you a little bit of a broader context because I think some of the history gets lost, and so it's kind of hard to get a grip on what's so remarkable about this period, what is very similar to other periods, what was going on that was driving some of the innovation in theater and in civilization at this time. The center of our focus is the cultural blossoming that takes place during the 5th century BC in the city-state of Athens in Greece, in what is called the Peloponnesian Peninsula. So it is one part of Greece, one part of what was considered Greece in that period, and one part of what would be considered the nation state of Greece now. Okay, although parts of Macedonia, which are a separate country now, would be considered Greek and were considered Greek in that period. So what's the 5th century BC? That's going to be the 400s BC. Remember, we're counting backwards with BC. Okay, so we would be headed 400s, 300s, 200s, 100s, etc. when we're kind of looking. They had a different calendar, and so they didn't think of their time as being counted backwards. The one thing I want to say before I get started with all this, and this is a relatively short video, is that obviously the material that I'm going to talk about could fill an entire course. It could be the center of your PhD study. It's a giant amount of material, and so I'm going to have to speak in some pretty broad generalizations, which are in essence true, but there are of course exemptions and outliers within every one of these statements that I make, which would say, well, that's not 100% true. Absolutely. Almost everything that I'm going to say during this video is not 100% true. There are outliers, there are outstanding examples to the opposite, etc. throughout all of the major elements that I'm going to sort of talk about. But it gives you a kind of an overview. So one of the things that you'll probably see in the video, and one of the important ways to kind of think about Greek theater, is to sort of focus on the Theater Dionysus, because the Theater Dionysus was the central venue in some ways of the contests within Athens, within the Athenian state, through which many plays were developed. And that's really a good way to think about it, because the plays were commissioned by the city fathers as a part of the festival, chosen through a contest, and then this was the first real bringing on of professional actors, people that were paid to do nothing but act. There's a fair amount of evidence to suggest that since this happened on a regular basis, some of these people were pretty much did nothing else, and that would have made them sort of career professionals in the theater. So this is we mark this as kind of the transition from tribal ritual to codified professional theater. And I think that the video also talks about the fact that Theater Dionysus really started off very much like a version of tribal ritual, something like what we would see at the Sundance, tribal Western Indians in the United States, and when we're talking about Navajo, for example, or Lakota, they prefer the term Indians, so there's no reason to try to get particular about that. Native American, if you will, but the Lakota that I know prefer Indian. The Navajo I know prefer Indian. So those folks have actually the Lakota adopted the Sundance from another tribe, but it's a tribal ritual in the Western United States. The Sundance, it's got some very specific elements to it. It changes and evolves over. It involves dancing. It involves pantomime. It involves a lot of different theatrical elements and music. And so the difference between that and a musical theater production on Broadway, I wouldn't say there's a big cultural difference between the two of those things. And certainly there's very little difference between that and the original origins of the Theater Dionysus, except for the fact that those original origins were much more audience participatory, and I would add they were much more focused on a particular outcome, which was to really inspire people to have sex and bring forth the next generation, which was something that you think, well, people don't need a lot of inspiration along those lines. Well, when you have routine plagues and wars and decimation of your society, a lot of people look around and be like, why am I bothering to try to put all this energy into having children and raising children? If they're just going to be killed in wars, they're just going to die of disease, it's just going to create more misery for myself. So there are periods in history and periods within particular cultures when they die out. And one of the main reasons that they die out or flatline is because people become despondent and leave the urban areas. They give up on the society, and in those days dissipated into bands and went into other sort of urban areas because that urban area would fall into decay. It happened in the Americas on a gigantic level with the Mississippian culture, for example. So this period saw the rise of Greek city-states, which became very powerful, imperial entities, meaning they went on and conquered other entities and folded them into their control, government control. And that's a pretty new thing, although the Persian Empire existed and other empires did exist sort of on the borders of the Athenian, the Greek Empire. I'm going to show you a map that kind of visualizes that in a second, but let's look at where the Theater Dionysus just existed within, say, Athens itself. And you can see this map here in front of you. And if you pull back, we see where that Theater Dionysus was, sort of in the center of Athens, very near the temple, very near the Parthenon, which maybe you're more recognize. We're going to see a picture of that, but right in the center part. Now, Athens is a city that's nestled among hills, which makes it very defensible in some ways militarily in that period. But it is near a beautiful natural harbor, although the center of the city is not right on the harbor, and that's for good reason. In this period, you might be able to get ships up into the harbor, and you may not be able to defend against that with your navy, and you didn't want the center of your city necessarily right on depending on the geography, right on the edge of the harbor. People might be able to land their ships, but then they might not be able to fight their way up into the center of the city. This is actually not more than about a 5 to 10 minute cab ride. I've actually walked it as well. So it's certainly something that you can do even in that period, in the span of an afternoon, land your ship and be in the center of Athens in the same afternoon. If we pull back a little farther, we can really start to appreciate that this is quite a harbor. This is the Peloponnese Peninsula, tipped off on the end by the Temple of Poseidon. And this is the gateway into sort of the larger Aegean Sea, but this is a very sheltered piece of water, okay? It's a natural harbor that allows for a lot of ships, and yet it's protected from the larger Mediterranean in many ways. Many of the sort of famous Greek islands are down in this area of Mykonos, etc. And yet it's very close to a lot of other very important, still very important civilizations. What is now Turkey, what is now Italy, Albania, Sicily, Bulgaria, you can see, okay? So, and if we were to go through here, we're into Romania and Russia and what is the Ukraine, okay, on the Black Sea. So this is a trading hub of the period, civilization really having sort of started as we think of it, ancient civilization really starting in this sort of area, part of the world, the Tigris River in Iraq, okay, Jerusalem, etc. Okay, a little later becoming important. Okay, Egypt. So this is a body of water that is navigable by the ships of the period. It can be a rough bed of water, but it is certainly nothing like the open ocean of the Atlantic, and the geographic distances are much smaller. So I took off from Athens in a sailboat and was here by the middle of the evening, here by 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and was here and docked by the morning the next day. So to give you an idea of how far one can sail a boat in what distance and what period of time, right? So to continue on, even in that period, 6-7 knots or better, you're going to end up here well within a week. Crete, well within a week. Okay? So, it gives you some notion of this. The theater of Dionysus itself, I don't know that they go into too much detail on this. It says it was opened in 534 BC. It says in the 6th century by the Athenian, and I'm not even going to attempt his name, a Athenian tyrant. Remember, we think of Greece as having a democratic, as being the hub of early democracy, but there were successive governments that were certainly not democratic in the city center of city-state of Athens. So now, again, to remember, city-state of Athens. So Athens was one of multiple city-states, and I've got a better map of this somewhere. I'm going to hop around ahead for a second and see if I can get it. So yeah, we have here a better idea. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, these were all city-states. Delphi. Now they, after the Spartan War, Athens and Sparta sort of came together to fight Persia and were successful, Crete. And so this became really ancient Greece, sharing a language, sharing many cultural traditions, but still many times and often throughout that period having separate governments. So the Theater Dionysus was created roughly in this period, mostly early on as a tribal sort of ritualistic space. Gradually over time, those rituals became more and more set and fixed until they actually transitioned over into scripted works. We still have about 30 of those, almost exclusively from Sophocles, Aeschylus, and Euripides. Only one satyr play, but a few comedies from Aristophanes as well. Satyr plays being, well, you got a description of those. Anyway, so the Theater Dionysus was only